The co-leader of the New Zealand Green Party, James Shaw, has announced he'll be stepping aside in March.
We are very much a new caucus now, moving into opposition again for the first time in 6 years, and I feel the time is right for a new co-leader to stand alongside Marama.
He served as New Zealand's Climate Change Minister for 6 years and as Green Party co-leader for almost 9. Pacific political commentator Thomas Wynn told Caleb Fotheringham James Shaw's legacy around climate change will be long-lasting in the region.
I think James has been consistent in looking to amplify the Pacific voice and the impact of climate change for Pacific peoples. And for him, it was a key priority. I think one of the significant pieces of work was when the government co-sponsored and led by James Vanuatu, when they went to the ICJ, and of course the ICJ is in everybody's sort of crosshairs at the moment, where they co-sponsored Vanuatu asking the question and clarification on other states' legal obligations in protecting the rights of places like the Pacific from climate change and the adverse effects of it. And what he did there was he really helped large ocean states have a voice against larger polluting countries and to get a UN legal opinion on it. I think of all the things that James has done, the mechanisms that he's utilised, that for me is one that's a real standout because he allowed Vanuatu to lead it and the government here at the time co-sponsored it. So that one sort of sticks out in my mind probably the most. And then, of course, at COP25 and the different COPs, James went as the climate change minister, and I know friends of mine and colleagues that were working at the Moana Blue Pacific space, always appreciated his support. And I think lastly, the Pacific countries especially wanted greater access to climate funding, climate adaptation funding. Many of these larger countries talk about green climate funding and the financing available, but often these countries do not have the skills to be able to access it and the cumbersome to do. And James was really good at helping Pacific countries get a hold of that financing so they could do what they needed to do in their own country and self-determine for themselves what they needed to do to combat something that actually, they hadn't precipitated. So I think that will go down for me. I think in the Pacific, James was a friend to the Pacific and he practiced what he preached. And I think that's something that will be a legacy of his for us in the Pacific.
Do you imagine Pacific leaders will be quite sad to see him go then?
Yeah, I can imagine there's a sense of uncertainty now, with James gone. There were, in the Pacific, everything is around relationship. And, James had a good relationship with the nations in the Pacific. And I think locally, our younger Pacific voter really leaned into the principles and the values of the Green Party. I know numbers of even my own children voted for the Greens, and there was something about their message that resonated with that younger Pacific voter making their way through that maybe became disenfranchised or disillusioned with the other parties or the other main parties that Pacific people have generally, leaned into. So I can see as the future goes on, with James stepping out, the next person stepping in will be critical to really capture that Pacific voice and that Pacific vote in this next generation coming through this next election cycle.
Do you think James Shaw will be, we've spoken in, he's primarily, it seems, known for sort of that climate change space. Do you think he'll be remembered for other things that he potentially did for Pacific peoples outside of that?
No, I don't. I think actually this will be the area, and it really was unashamedly his focus. Marama had, the DV, domestic violence, family violence space, and other, parts of the Green Caucus had other remits, but James was very clear about what he stood for, what he championed, and, if one is realistic, one can do one job really, really well, and Parliament can put you across a whole range of work, and sometimes you don't do it all well because your focus is somewhere else. But James was very clear about what he wanted to do and what his focus was. I think his legacy around climate change will be long-lasting.
Who do you think is going to be the next leader?
Look, selfishly, if I could say, look, I really think, and I am biased, I'm 100% biased, I just needed to admit my bias, but my cousin, Tiano Tuiono, I think would be an amazing leader for the Greens. He's Pacific and Māori, and, he has courage. He's spoken his truth in Parliament and outside. He leads from the back, and he just serves. So my pick, and I declare my bias, would definitely be Tiano. I think he would be an amazing co-leader to the Green Party and to partner with, the amazing work that Martin does.
And I imagine if he is picked, he can fill some of that Pacific gap that James Shaw could potentially leave behind with that climate space stuff that he's been so focused on.
Yeah, look, I think it would send a very, very strong signal to the Pacific that the Green Party see the value in Pacific people within their, not just within their party, but within their leadership. And, to have someone potentially like Tiano, in the Pacific championing on behalf of the Pacific climate change crisis would just be something I know for Pacific people would really just support. But ultimately, that decision with the Greens will be left to their members, and they'll make the right decision.